If someone had told me a month ago that I would fall in love with a guy at adult summer camp, I would have laughed in their face. It sounded like something out of a cheesy indie film. But here I am, lying in the same bed with him, our clothes on the floor. It started 2 weeks ago. I'd been convinced, more like peer pressured, by my sister to sign up for this week-long retreat. "You need a break," she said. "Someplace with real people, not just work emails and Instagram DMs." Fine. I signed up, imagining maybe I'd learn to kayak or do some awkward group yoga and go home with a tan. But instead, I met Jamie. I got to camp on a humid Sunday afternoon, dragging my duffel bag across the gravel path like every other 30-something, trying to reclaim some childlike wonder. Everything smelled like pine needles and bug spray. The cabins looked like they hadn't been updated since the 80s, peeling green paint, wobbly steps, screen doors that creaked louder than necessary. I was assigned to cabin 4, which I shared with 3 other guys. Jamie was one of them. He was already sitting on the bottom bunk when I walked in, arms folded behind his head, shirt damp with sweat, and a book resting open on his chest. He looked like he'd just walked out of a Levi's ad. Broad shoulders, scruffy beard, sun-bleached hair. When he saw me, he smiled like we'd known each other for years. "Hey, you must be cabin mate number 4. "Looks like it," I said, trying not to sound winded from dragging my bag uphill. "I'm Adam." "Jamie." He sat up, offering a hand. His grip was firm, warm. "You here for the nature or the escape?" "Little bit of both," I replied. He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. That first night, the camp had a welcome mixer around the main lodge. String lights were strung between trees. Some overzealous volunteer DJ was playing acoustic covers of 90s hits, and there was free sangria, which helped. I was sipping mine when Jamie found me near the fire pit. "Not your scene?" he asked, settling next to me. "Not really a party guy," I said. "Same," he said. "But I figured if I stood near the fire, no one would try to make me play icebreaker games." That made me laugh. We ended up talking for almost an hour about how he worked in education, how I did freelance writing, and how both of us had signed up for this camp mostly as a way to not lose our minds from burnout. He had this way of making me feel like I wasn't performing, like I didn't need to be charming or clever, just present. That night, back in the cabin, I lay awake on the top bunk, listening to the sound of crickets outside and Jamie's slow, steady breathing below me. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. I thought maybe that would be it, a nice connection, a week of camp friendship. But I was wrong. So wrong. The next morning started with a mandatory mindful movement session on the lakefront. I rolled out of bed sore and cranky, only to find Jamie already dressed, leaning against the doorframe, sipping instant coffee from a chipped enamel mug. "Ready for some breathing exercises and awkward downward dogs?" he asked, grinning. "You make it sound so appealing," I muttered, dragging my hoodie over my head. Despite my skepticism, the session wasn't terrible. The lake shimmered with early sunlight, and the air was cool and crisp. I kept glancing sideways at Jamie, trying not to be obvious about it. He looked annoyingly good doing yoga, confident, flexible, balanced. Meanwhile, I was trying not to fall over during Warrior 2. After breakfast, the camp staff split us into activity groups. Jamie and I got assigned to the same hiking group, and I couldn't help but smile. We loaded into a van that smelled faintly of sunscreen and old granola bars and drove 20 minutes to a nearby trailhead. The hike was supposed to be moderate, but halfway through I was questioning whoever came up with that label. The trail climbed through dense forest, sun dappling through the leaves, and roots snaking across the dirt like tripwires. I stumbled once, catching myself just in time. Jamie glanced back. "You good?" "Just trying not to break an ankle before lunch." He chuckled and waited for me to catch up. "Want to hang back with me?" "No rush." So we walked together at the rear of the group, letting the others drift ahead. And with every step, it felt like the world got quieter, just the rhythm of our boots, the wind in the trees, birds calling from somewhere up above. "I used to hike all the time," Jamie said. "Then life got in the way." "Same," I said. "Feels good to be off the grid." He nodded. "It's weird how fast you get used to not checking your phone." "Like, I don't miss it. Except for maybe ordering pizza," I I joked. He laughed, and something about the sound made my chest tighten. There was a spot about halfway up the trail where the trees opened onto a narrow overlook. A few others had stopped there to take photos, but Jamie and I just sat on a boulder and let our legs dangle. Below us was a spread of treetops, stretching all the way to a sliver of the lake in the distance. The air smelled like moss and pine. It was quiet in a way that felt holy. Jamie shifted closer, his knee brushing mine. Neither of us moved away. "You ever feel like you're just pretending all the time?" he asked, voice softer now. "Like playing the part people expect from you?" I glanced at him. He wasn't looking at me, just staring out at the view. "All the time," I said. "I think I got so good at it I forgot who I actually am." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, same." We sat in silence for a while. Then he turned to me and for the first time looked me straight in the eyes. "I like talking to you, Adam. Like, actually talking." I felt my heart stumble in my chest. "Me too," I said quietly. I don't know how long we sat there after that, but when the group called out that it was time to head back, Jamie stood and offered me his hand. I took it. His grip was firm, warm, and for a second he didn't let go. After the hike, most of us sprawled out on the lawn behind the lodge, sun-drunk and sore. Someone had pulled out a Bluetooth speaker, and soft indie music drifted lazily over the grass. Jamie lay a few feet away from me, arms behind his head, shirt tugged up just enough to reveal a strip of his lower stomach. I tried not to look. Failed. "You ever wonder what your life would look like if you'd made one different decision?" he asked suddenly, his eyes still on the sky. I rolled onto my side to face him. Every day. That night was the campfire. Not just any campfire. This one was the big end-of-the-week gathering with beer in coolers, marshmallows on skewers, and one brave staff member with a guitar who'd been talked into singing covers of everything from Fleetwood Mac to Taylor Swift. I wasn't usually the kind of guy who mingled easily, but with Jamie there, I found myself relaxing. We stuck close all night, sometimes silent, sometimes joking, sometimes just sitting shoulder to shoulder, listening to the fire crackle. At one point, he turned toward me with a marshmallow that was half on fire. "Can't tell if I ruined it or improved it," he said, holding it out. I leaned in and took a bite without thinking. Our fingers brushed. We both froze for a moment. The fire popped loudly, sending a few sparks into the air. Jamie laughed, a little too loud, and shoved the stick back into the sand. But his knee stayed against mine. Later, after the fire had burned low and people had started wandering back to their cabins, I lingered behind to help clean up. Jamie stayed too. We didn't say much, just passed empty cans and water bottles into the bin, worked around each other in this weird, quiet rhythm. When we were done, we stood there a moment, looking out at the glowing embers. "You heading back?" I asked. "Eventually," he said. "Mind if we walk a bit?" "Sure." The path behind the fire pit curved down toward the lake, winding past darkened cabins and quiet trees. We didn't need flashlights. The moon was nearly full, casting a silvery light across everything. When we reached the dock, Jamie stepped onto it and sat at the edge, feet dangling above the still water. I followed, sitting beside him. "Tomorrow's the last full day," he said after a while. "Yeah, feels like it went fast." It did. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, just full. Then, softly, he said, "This week has been different. Not just the nature and the unplugging. I mean, you." I turned to him. I wasn't expecting to meet someone here, and I definitely wasn't expecting to feel anything real. I swallowed, pulse suddenly loud in my ears. I wasn't either. He looked at me then. Really looked. And it was one of those moments where the air shifts, where the world gets very quiet and you realize something's about to happen that you'll never forget. And then he kissed me. It was slow, hesitant at first, like he was still giving me a chance to pull away. But I didn't. I leaned in, I kissed him back. And the world stopped for a little while. When we pulled apart, we just sat there, forehead to forehead, the lake glimmering beneath us, the dock creaking softly under our weight. "I've wanted to do that since the second day," he whispered. I smiled. "You waited too long," he laughed under his breath. "I didn't want to screw it up." "You didn't." The next morning, I woke up early, too early, and lay there staring at the cabin ceiling, heart still beating somewhere in my throat. Jamie was still asleep on the bottom bunk, his arms slung over his eyes to block out the light leaking through the curtains. The whole cabin smelled faintly like pine and sunblock and something uniquely him, something warm. I turned onto my side, trying to make sense of everything. Last night didn't feel like a fluke. It didn't feel like camp hormones or too many beers or the magic of moonlight and s'mores. It felt like something real. But we didn't talk about it that morning. We acted normal, almost too normal. Shared a plate of pancakes at breakfast, helped each other pack for the canoeing activity, even joined a group game of capture the flag like it was just another Thursday at summer camp. And maybe that was his way of saying, let's not make this complicated. I went along with it. What else could I do? By the afternoon, the weight of that silence was starting to settle in. We sat side by side on a picnic bench after kayaking, eating trail mix and drinking lukewarm water from plastic bottles. "You okay?" I asked. Jamie hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, just tired." He wasn't tired. I wasn't either. We were both just stuck in that in-between space where something big had happened, but no one wanted to say the first word about it. The staff announced that the final night would include a group talent show and an optional campfire closing circle after dark. I figured we'd both skip it and sneak back to the dock. But Jamie surprised me. "I signed us up," he said at dinner. "For what?" "The show. We're doing something." I blinked. "What are we doing?" He grinned, holding up a notebook. "You're gonna help me read this stupid poem I wrote. I figured if I embarrass myself in public, maybe it'll make everything feel less heavy." I didn't know whether to laugh or be impressed. "Jamie, I don't do poetry." "Exactly," he said. "Neither do I." We didn't rehearse. We just stood up there that night, under the outdoor string lights, in front of maybe 50 people, and stumbled through a 2-part reading about trees and rain and growing older and not knowing what the hell you're doing, but trying anyway. And somehow, it worked. The crowd clapped, someone whistled, we bowed like idiots. And when we got back to our cabin that night, something had shifted. No more pretending. That night, it wasn't just a kiss on a dock. It was undressing slowly, quietly, sharing a bed, letting his fingers trace the edge of my spine, letting mine memorize the line of his jaw. It wasn't rushed or wild. It was careful, like we were building something, like we knew how easily it could break. He held me close afterward, his breath warm on my neck, and whispered, "I don't know what happens when we leave this place." "I don't either," I whispered back. But I didn't care. Not right then. Right then, all I cared about was the fact that I wasn't alone in that bed. And neither was he. The last day of camp felt like a countdown I didn't want to start. People were exchanging numbers, hugging, promising to stay in touch. The camp group chat was already buzzing with selfies, inside jokes, and suggested reunion dates that would probably never happen. Jamie and I didn't talk much that morning, not because things were weird, but because neither of us knew how to have the conversation we needed to. Not while brushing our teeth next to 2 other guys. Not while folding our sleeping bags and stuffing them into duffels like nothing had changed. By mid-morning, the staff had gathered everyone near the flagpole for one last gratitude circle, and I stood there, arms crossed, trying not to think about the fact that in a few hours, Jamie and I would get into our separate cars and go back to lives hundreds of miles apart. When it ended, we wandered down to the lake. Just us. We sat on the same dock where we'd kissed. The water was calm, glittering in the sun. "I wasn't expecting this," Jamie said, voice low. "Me either." He picked at a splinter on the dock's edge. "I keep trying to figure out what to say, and everything sounds stupid. Say it anyway." He paused. Then, "I don't want to leave this behind." but I also don't know how to bring it with me. I nodded slowly. I get it. I live in Indianapolis, he said. My life's there. Job, family, routine. This week felt like a break from all that, but it also felt more honest than anything I've done in years. Same, I said quietly. I don't know what I expected when I came here, but I didn't think I'd meet someone who made me want to change everything. We sat in silence, letting that hang between us. Jamie turned to me. What if we just try? Try what? This, us. See where it goes, no pressure, no expectations, just see. My throat tightened. I didn't realize how much I wanted to hear that until he said it. Okay, I said, let's try. He reached for my hand. I took it. We sat like that for a long time. Fingers laced, legs swinging above the water, not saying much, just holding on to the moment like it was the last one we'd get. It wasn't. That night, after everyone had packed up and rolled out of Camp Woodpine, I sat alone in my car at a gas station 20 minutes down the road. The back seat was stuffed with a dusty duffel, my hiking boots still caked in dried mud, and a half-eaten granola bar I didn't remember buying. The dashboard glowed dimly. The GPS was set to take me back to Chicago. But I wasn't ready to move. I wasn't ready to let this week become a memory. I stared at Jamie's name on my phone, thumb hovering over the screen like it was a detonator. He'd hugged me before we left. Longer than you'd hug a friend. Not quite long enough to feel like a goodbye. He didn't say much, just looked at me in that quiet way he did, like there were 100 things behind his eyes he didn't know how to say. I didn't know how to say them either. I still didn't, but I wanted to try, so I typed, "Miss you already, let's not let this be the end." I watched the screen after I hit send, heart thudding too hard for something so simple. 5 minutes passed. Then his reply lit up my screen. "I was about to text you the same thing. I meant what I said, Adam. Let's try." And just like that, I exhaled. Really exhaled. Like I hadn't let myself breathe properly since the moment I left that dock. The weeks that followed felt surreal, like the camp had somehow followed us home. We texted constantly. Little things, big things, photos of our breakfasts, voice notes of the music we were listening to, jokes that made no sense to anyone else. But beneath all of that was something unspoken. This shared understanding that what happened at camp wasn't a one-off. It wasn't some escape bubble that popped the second we left. It was something more. The first time I visited Jamie in Indianapolis, I was nervous as hell. I remember standing outside his apartment building, hands sweating, trying to convince myself that it wouldn't be weird, that it wouldn't feel different in the real world. It didn't. When he opened the door, I knew. We fell back into step like no time had passed. He cooked for me, burnt the rice, forgot the sauce, apologized 5 times. I didn't care. We lay on his couch and watched a movie we barely paid attention to. We slept in the same bed like we had that last night at camp. Only now, we didn't have to pretend we weren't falling asleep tangled in each other on purpose. And that became our rhythm. Some weekends I drove to him, some weekends he flew to me. We met each other's friends, asked the hard questions, figured out what worked and what didn't. And it wasn't perfect, it was long distance, it was real life. Sometimes we fought, sometimes we questioned if we were moving too fast or too slow, but we kept showing up. And that, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. About a year after Camp Woodpine, I found myself standing in a small Indianapolis apartment, Jamie beside me, holding a set of duplicate keys in his hand. "I know it's not Chicago," he said, "but the lease is cheap, and I make a killer Saturday morning breakfast." I didn't even hesitate. That night, we unpacked boxes, while rain tapped gently on the windows. And tucked inside one of mine, wrapped in an old t-shirt, was a pine cone we'd picked up together on the hiking trail. It had been drying out on a bookshelf ever since. Jamie spotted it as I set it down. "You really kept that thing?" I smiled. "Of course I did. It reminds me of the beginning, and now it sits on a little shelf in our entryway. A small, ordinary thing, easy to overlook, but for us, it's proof that something simple can become something sacred. That what started in the woods, under string lights and mosquito nets, on a dock in the middle of nowhere, could survive out here in the real world. We were supposed to be just camp friends, but we weren't. And we never will be. Last weekend, Jamie and I went back to Camp Woodpine. It was closed for the season. No group hikes, no campfire songs, no awkward introductions around a circle of folding chairs. But we called ahead, explained who we were, and the owner agreed to let us walk the grounds for an afternoon. Said she remembered us. "You two read that poem," she smiled. "Everyone still talks about it." The place looked smaller somehow. Or maybe we just felt bigger. We wandered through the empty cabins, hands in our pockets, shoulders brushing as we walked. It was cold this time of year, and most of the trees were bare, but it didn't feel sad. It felt peaceful. When we got to the dock, I sat down in the same spot where he kissed me the first time. The lake was still, half frozen at the edges. Jamie sat beside me. "We never saw it coming, did we?" I asked. He shook his head, grinning. "Nope. I thought you were just the quiet guy with the sarcastic t-shirts. And I thought you were the hot guy who read books but probably ghosted people." We laughed, the kind of laughter that only comes when you've shared something that survived time, distance, and doubt. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A small, worn notebook, the same one he'd used to scribble that dumb campfire poem. "I've been writing again," he said. "Mostly garbage. But sometimes I write about you." I didn't know what to say. I just looked at him, feeling that same quiet electricity from that first night, the same rush, the same warmth in my chest. "I want this," he said. "Not just now, not just because it worked this year. I want a life with you." It hit me all at once. The dock, the lake, the pine cone on our shelf, every late night call and weekend visit. Every time we almost let fear get in the way and chose love instead. I didn't have a ring, he didn't get on one knee. But it didn't matter. This wasn't a proposal. It was a promise. A real one. "I want that too," I said, and I meant every word. The wind kicked up over the water. Jamie reached for my hand and laced our fingers together like he'd done that first morning after. And we sat there. Two guys who met by accident at an adult summer camp. Quiet, steady, warm. Not because everything was perfect, but because we had decided, again and again, that we were worth it. And that maybe, just maybe, we'd found something most people spend their whole lives looking for.